Hey, folks, and welcome into episode 6 of the Longhorn Mailbag, answering your questions from our board over at Horns 24/7. So let's get right into answering those questions, starting off with a nice true or false segment pertaining to the week 1 opener against Rice for Texas, given to us by Ranger's dad. So a couple different questions within the true or false here that will go one by one. Starting off with Texas will have over 500 yards in total offense. I'm going to go true here. Longhorns had 620 yards in 2021. I think the offense is very much improved, so I think they go over that 500 mark on offense once again. Next up, two running backs will rush for over 100 yards. This one's a little bit tougher. I'm going to lean slightly true here. I do think that we can see it from two out of the top three guys that we have talked about, those being Jonathan Brooks, Cedric Baxter, and Keelan Robinson. Really, if it were to happen, I think Jonathan Brooks and Cedric Baxter are your two guys to look for there. So I'm leaning slightly true on this one just because Longhorns ran the ball very well in 2021 against Rice. Now, granted, that was Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson, but certainly you can expect Steve Sarkisian to want to establish a good run game in week 1. Up next, three quarterbacks will take snaps. This is another one where I'm kind of on the fence about it, but I think I'm going to go true here. Steve Sarkisian in his presser earlier this week mentioned that the backup quarterback battle between Malik Murphy and Arch Manning was still ongoing. So obviously you're going to see a lot of Quinn Ewers to start. It just depends on how much of a leash he has, how long Steve Sarkisian wants to keep him out there. Then after that, Steve Sarkisian saying that Thursday was the day they would decide who quarterback 2 is. Maybe if he makes the decision Thursday, but still wants to see some game action to come to a realization where he can, sleep better at night, really feel more comfortable with it. We see a little bit of both. And I'm not saying that's where the competition is going to go, but I do think Steve Sarkisian is going to want to see both of those guys in game action. So for that reason, I'm going to say true here, and we will see three quarterbacks at some point during the game. Maybe even if it is whoever doesn't end up quote unquote winning the backup quarterback job, maybe in the last couple of minutes, because I do think, and no offense to Rice, that this game will get out of hand. So the opportunity will be there, in my opinion. Next up, Texas will force 2 turnovers. This is the one that I'm going to go false with just because, we maybe not see a very aggressive defensive approach in this game from Pete Kwiatkowski's team. Now, keep in mind that unit has been very focused on generating turnovers throughout the offseason, something that they certainly want to make more of this year. But when you look ahead to week 2, and I know this Texas team is doing anything but looking ahead, but you want to keep your guys healthy, maybe not play too aggressive, but still play to a level of aggressiveness enough to where you play good defense and win football games. Last time Texas played Rice, they only had 1 turnover off a fumble recovery. So I'm going to go false for this one, just so we don't have true all the way down. And that leads into the final 2, which would be Texas defense will hold Rice to under 10 points. I'm going to go true here on this one. Longhorns blanked the Owls back in 2021. I think they do very similarly here, or they keep it under 10. I don't see any way where this Rice offense scores more than 10, even with JT Daniels at quarterback. And lastly, Texas will register 3 sacks. I'm going to go with true on this one as well. Defensive line position is one of the deepest and one of the best on this roster, so I think they can get after the quarterback and bring down JT Daniels at least 3 times. Our second question coming from Agent Oren. Do you think Isaiah Nayor could come back for another year if he doesn't get a lot of playing time, or will he just try and go to the league? So Isaiah Nayor would be eligible to go to the draft in 2024 if he so chooses. But I think if he doesn't get the playing time and production that he wants this season, I think it might be in his best interest to stay one more year at Texas, because you think about the wide receiver room now. You've got Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, Jordan Whittington, and then that 4th spot is really up to battle between Jonte Cook and Isaiah Nayor. Now, if you look ahead to next season, Jordan Whittington to the draft, Xavier Worthy to the draft, A.D. Mitchell to the draft, even Jatavian Sanders to the draft. So that's 4 major targets away and off the board for Texas heading into next season. Well, there's your spot, Isaiah Nayor. The spot is wide open waiting for him. He's going to have that veteran experience going into the season. So I think he might be better off staying one more year and getting some more production so that he's able to raise his draft stock a little bit more. At least that's how it sits with me. That's how I look at it when it comes to his draft projection, excuse me. And next up from Horns Up 12, a little bit of a 2-part question here. First up, what kind of leap will Quinn Ewers make this year? And number two, will Ewers have a dependable running game to be able to keep teams honest? Well, two very good questions here. Number one, I've touched on this before. I do think Quinn Ewers has a big jump this year. Now, how big is obviously yet to be seen, but I don't think this needs to be a massive leap for Texas to have success. This doesn't need to be a Mac Jones-esque leap, like at year two for him at Alabama under Steve Sarkisian, for Texas to have success, because Ewers has the weapons around him to make things happen. Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, Jordan Whittington, Jatavian Sanders, Jonte Cook, Isaiah Nayor. That's six guys that can get the ball and do something with it for Texas, and that will be able to do that all season long. Now, obviously, to answer kind of the second part of the question, the running game is going to be very important regardless. Texas brings back all five starters on the offensive line, which is certainly a huge boost. I think Jonathan Brooks is going to be really good this year. He flashed at sometimes last year, and then you bring in Cedric Baxter, the number one running back in the country in the 2023 class that we've heard a lot of good things about in fall camp. The running game doesn't need to be at the level that it was with Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson to be able to make defenses think about whether or not they have to protect the run or the pass. I think it just needs to be good enough this season for the passing game to open up. And I think that Steve Sarkisian thinks the same thing. So they will establish the run. I think it's going to be good enough for Quinn Ewers to be able to have a lot of open targets when he decides to drop back and throw. So to recap, I think Quinn Ewers makes a good enough jump for Texas to be successful, and that the running game is good enough for Quinn Ewers' passing game to make a jump here in his second season. I really don't think Quinn Ewers had all that bad of a first season considering the circumstances. His first season actually playing football, since he didn't take any snaps at Ohio State, any meaningful snaps that is. You look at his numbers, 2,177 passing yards, 15 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. You might want to see a higher completion percentage, only 58% a season ago. But like I mentioned, with the amount of weapons that he has on the field, it's hard to see those numbers not improving. And you also think he missed a couple of games in injury as well. So, yes, I think you see a jump from Quinn Ewers. I think the running game is good enough for Texas to be able to keep teams honest defensively. All right, question number 4 coming in from Tip-Off, Texas. With the current class, what's your guess for the finish of 5 stars, setting the over-under at 3.5? And you guys love these over-under recruiting questions, and I do too. So I've got with Hank South on this one to kind of discuss it and pick his brain. Right now, Colin Simmons is the only 5-star recruit on board for Texas. Still targeting guys like Kobe Black, the 5-star corner out of Waco Connolly, the 5-star defensive lineman Dominic McKinley, who's making his decision later this week, 5-star wide receiver Ryan Wingo out of St. Louis, and 5-star offensive tackle Brendan Baker out of Monterey Day High School in California. And then you maybe look at a potential rankings bump for Jarrett Gibson, the 4-star running back who's already committed to the Longhorns. So I just named 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys to look at. We're setting the over-under at 3.5. I'm going to go over here. I think that Texas is in a really good spot for a lot of those guys, especially Kobe Black and Dominic McKinley. And I think they can add one more out of Ryan Wingo, Brandon Baker, and then maybe seeing a Jarrett Gibson rankings bump. So to answer that question, I'm going to go over, looking. I would say the over at 4 would be my pick at this point in time. All right, and last but certainly not least, our final question from Touchdown Horns 34. How concerned are you with cornerback recruiting this cycle? Well, Touchdown Horns 34, I'm not concerned at all, really, and mostly because I look at the roster that Texas has right now and some of the young guys that they have. Guys like Austin Jordan, Terrence Brooks, Malik Muhammad, who has made a ton of noise, especially at the end of fall camp. I think those guys are really well set, and they have a bright future for Texas, so they're going to hold down the fort here for the next 2-3 years. And then you look at the class that they have right now. Santana Wilson, really the only true cornerback on board. Guys like Jordan Johnson-Rubel, more of a safety. Same thing with Aaron Hampton out of Dangerfield. And you also have to think about, I don't think that Texas is done recruiting this position just yet. I think they're in a really good spot for 5-star Waco Connolly cornerback Kobe Black, who I just talked about in my previous question. If they're able to get him on board, I think that really is a massive pickup, kind of like what Malik Muhammad was for Texas last year. I think this is a guy who will come in and contribute early, show flashes in camps, and be able to earn his spot on the depth chart fairly quickly. I think he's insanely talented. So to answer your question, long and short, Not really concerned about cornerback recruiting. I think Texas is in a very good spot. They've recruited the position well under Steve Sarkisian, and I think they'll continue to do so moving forward. That's going to do it for episode 6 of the Longhorn Mailbag. I want to thank you so much for joining us here on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you're the first to know when new content drops. And as always, be sure to keep an eye out on the Horns 24/7 board for our questions drop thread, where we'll be dropping the thread so you can drop your questions with a chance to have them answered on the next episode of the Longhorn Mailbag. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Happy game week, and we'll see you next time.